It began with a number that didn't belong. A number that should have been just another entry in a spreadsheet entitled. One black woman followed it all the way to the witness stand. But what no one expected was the moment the FBI walked through the courtroom doors and turned everything upside down. This is not just a story about injustice, it's a story about a woman who refused to break in, a truth that refused to stay hidden. Asterisk, it began with a number. Just one dot, not a big number, not a red flag, not the kind of number that screams for attention. It was quiet, tucked away in a vendor file on line 76 of a routine expense report. But something about it didn't feel right to Amara James. The amount, $18,750, had appeared 3 times in 4 months. The same exact figure, the same vague label, consulting services, but no matching invoice, no contact name, no email trail, nothing. She leaned back in her chair, blinking at the screen. Outside her office window, the city buzzed beneath the orange hue of a setting sun. Most of the staff had gone home. The vending machine light flickered. The janitor passed by, humming softly. But Amara was still at her desk, eyes narrowed, fingers poised over the keyboard, because something in her gut whispered, "Look again." And when Amara James listened to her gut, she always found the truth. She didn't know it yet, but that single payment was the first loose thread in a tapestry of secrets that would unravel not just her career but a company's reputation, a CEO's carefully built empire, and the silence of a courtroom that thought it had seen everything. 6 months later, she stood inside Courtroom 6D, facing accusations that could destroy her life. A once celebrated financial controller now branded a thief, a woman whose only real crime had been asking the wrong question at the wrong time. She adjusted the collar of her gray blazer and stared straight ahead, heart hammering, but her expression unreadable. Her attorney, Isaac Cole, leaned slightly toward her and whispered, "Whatever they say, hold your ground, you know who you are." She nodded. Barely. The courtroom was packed. Reporters sat in the front row, pens ready. Spectators filled the back, whispering quietly. Some looked curious, others judgmental, a few simply entertained. And across the room sat Calvin Drexler, the man who had once toasted her success at the company's annual gala, now sitting with the calm arrogance of someone who believed the ending had already been written in his favor. He didn't look at her, not once, but she could feel his presence like a storm cloud on the edge of a summer day. The judge entered, and the room rose. Amara kept her back straight, but her thoughts tumbled. She thought about her son, Miles, 10 years old, with a dimple on one side and a fearless imagination. That morning, before school, he had touched her face and said, "Mom, tell the truth, like you always do. That's your superpower." That was what kept her going. The prosecutor began the opening statement, her voice smooth, calm, and sharp. She painted Amara as a woman who had manipulated financial systems, misled colleagues, and pocketed millions from a company that trusted her. She laid out a picture of deception, betrayal, greed. The narrative felt rehearsed, convincing, dangerous, but Amara didn't flinch. She had heard it all before the headlines. The office whispers, the silence from people who once called her brilliant. In 6 months, she had lost her job, her reputation, her apartment, but she had never lost her integrity. As the prosecution clicked through a slideshow of spreadsheets and transactions, Amara's thoughts wandered back to that night she first found the pattern. She remembered staying late, her second cup of cold coffee in hand, the room dim except for the glow of her screen. She traced the payments back to a company name she didn't recognize, no in consulting, no address, no employees listed. When she cross-referenced it with vendor registration files, the trail went cold. That was unusual. And Amara didn't ignore unusual. The next day she followed it further. The payment routing numbers connected to a holding company in Delaware. From there, the funds traveled to an investment trust. The name on the trust, obscured until she matched a signature from an older lease document. Then everything stopped, because the signature belonged to someone she knew. She had gone straight to her manager. She explained everything she'd found, carefully, without accusation. But his response had been cold and oddly specific. "This isn't your responsibility. Stay in your lane." She'd gone one step higher, then higher still. Each time, doors closed, voices lowered, smiles faded. 2 weeks later, she was escorted out of the building without warning. Now inside Courtroom 6D, her name was being spoken like it was already a sentence. The prosecutor flipped to a slide, showing her email approvals. On paper, it looked undeniable. But the truth, like numbers, was more complicated, because Amara had never approved those transfers knowingly. Her credentials had been used, yes, her account, yes, but not her consent. And she had the one thing no one knew about, a hidden backup server she used for accuracy checking, one that preserved time-stamped log data, showing exactly when her account had been accessed, and by whom. But she hadn't shared that yet, not even with Isaac, because Amara wasn't just trying to prove her innocence, she was waiting for the moment when the truth would carry the most weight, when it would do more than clear her name. It would shake the walls of this courtroom. A flash went off in the gallery. Reporters scribbled, spectators whispered again. And just then, a voice called out from the side, "Ms. James, what will you tell your son when he asks why you did it?" Amara turned slowly, a journalist with a microphone. She didn't answer. The judge's gavel slammed down. Order in the court. But it was too late. The words hung heavy. She turned her gaze back, toward the front, fighting the pressure behind her eyes. She thought again of Miles, and the note he had slipped into her coat pocket that morning. "Be brave, Mummy." She would be, not just for him, but for herself, for the truth. She didn't know yet that within 48 hours, 2 unannounced visitors from a federal agency would walk into this very courtroom carrying a sealed file, one that would make the entire room fall silent. She didn't know that the story they would tell would match the one she had uncovered, and she didn't know that the world was about to find out that the woman they tried to frame had never been standing alone, but something deep in her bones told her the turning point was close, and this time, she wouldn't be the one caught off guard. It was almost midnight when the key clicked in Amara's apartment door. She stepped inside to the soft ticking of the hallway clock and the gentle hum of the refrigerator. The city beyond her window blinked with quiet lights, people sleeping, dreaming, forgetting. But Amara James couldn't forget. Not tonight. The courtroom had echoed in her ears all day, and even now, her pulse throbbed in rhythm with every word. The prosecutor had hurled like stones. Every accusation, every implication. She peeled off her blazer and hung it carefully, as if some small order in her world might keep the rest from crumbling. Then she moved to the small fireproof safe, tucked in her closet. Inside was a flash drive. A simple black stick, no label, no logo, but what it held could make or break everything. She stared at it in her palm, the weight imaginary, but the risk very real, because what she had wasn't just evidence to clear her name. It was evidence that could burn the entire structure down, not just Norwin Consulting, not just Whitestone Global, but the men and women behind it, names that appeared clean on paper, but in reality were anything but. She'd stumbled onto something bigger than missing funds. She'd stumbled onto something they had tried very hard to keep hidden. Back when she first found the signature on the shell company, her instinct had been to protect the truth, but her second instinct, sharpened by years of corporate games and silent sabotage, was to protect herself. So she copied everything, and when she realized her login credentials had been tampered with, she didn't go to HR. She went to a friend from college, a cybersecurity specialist named Yalan Ortiz. He owed her a favor. She called it in. Yalan had been quiet on the line that night, tapping away on his end. "You said it was just misfiled invoices," he murmured. "It was," she replied. "Now it's not." When he finally spoke again, his voice had lost its casual edge. "Amara, this isn't just embezzlement. This is laundering, international routing, fake consulting gigs. Someone is moving serious money offshore, and your account was the trigger access." She didn't speak for a long moment. "How much do you have?" he asked. "Everything," she said quietly. He told her 2 things that night. 1. Back up the data, but don't access it from any company-owned device. 2. Don't go public until she had protection. Protection. The word echoed now as she stared down at the flash drive in her hand, because today, during a recess in the trial, 2 men had approached her outside the courtroom. They weren't in suits, no badges. One wore a faded Braves cap, the other leaned against a column, unreadable. But the way they moved, the way they said her name, it wasn't casual. They didn't introduce themselves. They didn't need to. "Be careful what you share tomorrow," the one in the cap said. "Some stories aren't safe in daylight." She'd blinked. "Are you threatening me, warning you?" The other man finally spoke. People who shine light on the wrong things sometimes find themselves standing alone when the spotlight shuts off. You have a kid, right? That stopped her cold. Don't talk about my son. They didn't apologize, just walked away like nothing had happened. But she felt it, danger curling at the edges of the case like smoke under a locked door. She sat now at her kitchen table, the flash drive in front of her, and reached for her laptop, not the work-issued one, but the personal one, encrypted and offline. Click. The screen glowed. As she opened the drive, rows of files appeared. Spreadsheets, email trails, voice memos, timestamped login data. Then a folder she hadn't noticed before, unknown transfer _logs _August. She clicked it open and stopped breathing. Because at the top of the list was a name she recognized, not just from the company, from the courtroom. The judge. She froze, and then the phone rang. Blocked number. Her hand hovered over the screen. Then it rang again. Still blocked. She picked up. Hello. A pause. Then a voice. We need to talk. Tonight. Don't bring the drive. She recognized the voice immediately. It belonged to someone she hadn't seen in over a year. Someone who had left Whitestone Global suddenly, under the vague explanation of personal reasons. Malik Dawson. He had been head of compliance. Brilliant, discreet, and far too honest for a company that rewarded silence. His departure had raised eyebrows, but no one had asked questions. Until now. Why now? She asked. I saw your name in the news. I've been off the grid. But this isn't just corporate. It goes deeper. Why should I trust you? Because they tried to make me disappear, too. The line went dead. She sat there, numb. The words looped over and over. Make me disappear. Amara wasn't easily rattled. But tonight, the air felt different, heavy, pressurized. This wasn't about one woman clearing her name anymore. This was about something much larger. Someone had weaponized the justice system, paid off silence, buried trails, and she had uncovered it all without meaning to. And tomorrow, the cross-examination would begin. She knew they would try to rip her apart. They would dissect her actions, her motives, her credentials. They would point to numbers and emails twisted out of context. They would ask why she hadn't come forward sooner, why she had waited. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that the storm they thought they were bringing was already here. And Amara James was not the woman they believed she was. She wasn't here to defend herself anymore. She was here to expose them. At exactly 6:12 a.m. Amara stood at the edge of Lincoln Park, her coat zipped up to the neck against the morning chill. A thin fog clung to the grass like ghost breath, blurring the edges of the walking paths. She glanced at her phone. No new messages. The city hadn't woken up yet, but her nerves had been wide awake all night. Malik Dawson had told her to meet here. No time, no context, just a text from a burner number after their strange call the night before. She didn't know if this was smart. She only knew it was necessary. A dog barked in the distance. A jogger passed. She shifted her weight and looked around, scanning for familiar faces. And then, from behind a stone bench, Malik stepped out. He looked different, thinner, older somehow, like time had folded hard on him since she'd last seen him in the Whitestone boardroom. His eyes darted over his shoulder before they met hers. Thanks for coming, he said. You disappeared, she replied. I had to. After I filed a compliance flag about those transfers, someone broke into my apartment. Nothing stolen, just moved around. Enough to scare me. You think they're watching you now? He gave a tight nod. Always. Amara inhaled slowly. Why reach out now? Malik looked at her, his expression a mix of guilt and warning. Because I saw your name on the docket, and I realized something. They're not just trying to bury evidence. They're trying to use you to close the loop. She frowned. What do you mean? You were the last one with access to those records. If they discredit you, they discredit everything. You found no loose ends. The words landed hard. Amara had known this was bigger than one accusation, but hearing it said aloud, hearing that she was being used, it made her chest tighten. Her trial wasn't just a case, it was a cleanup. Malik pulled a small envelope from his pocket. What's this? It's not everything, but it's enough to shake their foundation. Internal memos, offshore transfers tied to shell entities, even a meeting log between Charles Whitaker and a federal contractor who isn't on any official record. Amara opened the envelope and scanned the contents quickly. Her hands trembled not from fear, but from the weight of what she was holding. How did you get this? she whispered. I never stopped digging, he said. I just did it quietly. A pause. You can't take this to the media yet, he added. Not without protection, not without a chain of custody, but someone inside the bureau already knows, and they're watching. Amara looked up sharply. What do you mean inside the bureau? Malik hesitated. You ever wonder why the FBI was at the courthouse yesterday? She nodded slowly. The courtroom's energy had shifted the moment those agents entered, tightened, like a rubber band stretched to the edge of snapping. They're not investigating you, Amara, Malik said. They're watching the people who framed you. There's something bigger happening, something involving government contracts and private accounts. Your trial is just the tip of the iceberg. Amara felt her pulse spike. So what now? You hold the line. Let them come after you. Let them try to tear you apart, but don't break, because the moment they go too far, someone else steps in, and when they do, you'll be ready. He pressed a USB drive into her hand. Backup of everything. Keep it offline. Don't look at it until you have to. And with that, Malik walked away. No goodbyes, no promises, just silence. Later that morning, back at the courthouse, Amara sat behind the defense table. While the jury filtered in, reporters scribbled, cameras clicked. The prosecution was about to begin its cross-examination. Victor Langley stood, smooth and poised. Miss James, he began, you've presented yourself as a victim, but the evidence suggests otherwise. Let's talk about your access privileges during the time of the transfers. She kept her expression neutral. Yes, I had access. I was part of the financial oversight team, and yet you failed to report any concerns to your superiors. Why? I did. I was told not to pursue it further. By whom? Amara's eyes flicked to Charles Whitaker, seated like a king behind his polished defense. The man barely met her gaze. By my direct supervisor. Langley smiled faintly. So we're to believe that a professional of your caliber was silenced by a simple warning? No, she replied. I wasn't silenced. I was erased. Gasps murmured through the courtroom. Langley straightened. You're claiming a conspiracy. I'm not claiming anything, Amara said evenly. I'm stating what happened. He stepped closer, now trying to unnerve her. Miss James, isn't it true that you personally authorized transfers to a company that doesn't even exist on your company's vendor list? She nodded slowly. Yes, but I didn't know that at the time. The account was labeled as a subcontractor approved by senior management, and yet you didn't ask questions. I always asked questions, she snapped before she could stop herself. That's why I'm sitting here now. Because I followed the numbers when no one else wanted to. There it was. The truth hung in the air like lightning, visible, dangerous, waiting to strike. Langley narrowed his eyes. You sound rehearsed, Miss James. She leaned forward slightly. Double quotes, no. I sound like someone who trusted the system, learned the hard way that the system doesn't always protect the truth. The courtroom stilled. And then, in the back row, a man in a dark blue suit stood. Clean-shaven.com, a small badge visible at his belt as he moved down the aisle without a word. Langley noticed him too. He froze. The man didn't address the judge, didn't disrupt the hearing. He simply made eye contact with Amara, nodded once, and turned to leave. But everyone saw it. Everyone felt it. A shift, a warning, a quiet message. You are not alone in this anymore. As the trial resumed, Amara's spine straightened. Because now, she wasn't just fighting to clear her name. She was fighting with proof, with backup, with witnesses, and whether or not the court was ready, truth was coming. The air in the courtroom didn't go back to normal. Not really. After the man in the navy suit walked out, a strange hush had fallen over the room, a silence, not of peace, but of something waiting, something ticking just beneath the surface. Amara felt it too. That man hadn't said a word, yet his presence had whispered the loudest truth of all. The walls had ears, and the story everyone thought they were watching unfold, might not be the real one at all. She sat straighter now, more composed. Not because she felt safe, she didn't, but because she finally felt seen. Across the room, Victor Langley shuffled his notes with a little too much force. His smooth, rehearsed rhythm had faltered. Charles Whitaker leaned toward him, whispering something behind his hand. Neither man looked comfortable anymore. Good. But as the next witness was called, Amara braced herself, because the defense wasn't out of the woods yet, not even close. Call Diane Franklin to the stand, the bailiff said. The courtroom door opened. and a tall woman in a crisp burgundy blazer walked in. Her heels echoed on the tile like a countdown. She was composed, elegant, and unmistakably confident. Diane had been the vice president of corporate compliance at Whitestone, Amara's former boss. Amara kept her expression blank, but inside, everything twisted. Diane was the one person who could either destroy her or clear her name. And knowing what she knew now, Amara wasn't sure which path Diane had chosen. The oath was given. Diane sat it, and Langley approached like a man tightening a noose. Ms. Franklin, he began. You oversaw all financial reporting protocols within Whitestone Corporation, is that correct? Yes, she said, calm and certain. And were you aware of Ms. James' internal investigation into irregular transfers? Diane hesitated, just a beat too long. I was made aware of her inquiries, she replied, but she did not follow proper procedure in reporting her concerns. She went around you. She acted outside the chain of command. Pulse thudded. That wasn't the whole truth, and Diane knew it. Langley leaned in. So you're saying she breached internal protocol? Yes, and when I questioned her about it, she became defensive. That was a lie. Amara had gone to Diane directly with proof, dates, emails, and Diane had thanked her. Said she'd handle it quietly. Now she was rewriting history. Amara wanted to speak, to stand and shout that this wasn't what happened. But her attorney, Marcus, placed a steady hand on her arm. Not yet, he whispered. She clenched her fists under the table. Langley continued. Would you describe Ms. James as a reliable employee? Diane's lips pursed. She was passionate, detail-oriented, but sometimes blinded by her own certainty. A carefully crafted insult. Langley smiled. No further questions. The judge turned to Marcus. Your witness. Marcus rose slowly, walking toward Diane with the casual grace of someone who knew exactly where the cracks were in a glass wall. Ms. Franklin, he said, you mentioned that Ms. James bypassed proper protocol, but didn't she email you on June 3rd regarding a series of flagged transactions? Diane blinked. I don't recall the exact date. Marcus pulled out a printed document. Let me refresh your memory. He handed the paper to the court clerk. It was an amorous email clearly time-stamped and addressed to Diane, outlining concerns about repeated transfers to a non-vetted entity. The courtroom leaned in. Diane read it. Yes, I received this. And what was your response? Marcus asked. I said I would look into it. And did you? Silence. Ms. Franklin, Marcus pressed. I passed it along to senior leadership, which included Mr. Whitaker. Yes. Marcus stepped back. So you're confirming that Ms. James did follow proper protocol, that you were made aware of her findings, and that the issue was elevated, that transfers continued. Diane didn't answer, because the truth had just slammed into the room like thunder. Amara watched as something flickered in Diane's eyes, not guilt, not fear, but something closer to regret, like she was remembering what it had felt like to do the right thing, and realizing she hadn't. No further questions, Marcus said, and returned to his seat. Amara's heart pounded not with anxiety, but with rising purpose. They were cracking. Not falling apart yet, but cracking. Then, from the gallery, a man cleared his throat. No one noticed at first. Then he stood, a different man from before. Older, grayer. His presence didn't feel like disruption, it felt like destiny unfolding. He didn't walk toward the judge. He didn't need to. He handed something to the bailiff. A manila envelope, sealed and marked with an official FBI crest. The judge opened it, read the contents. Her face shifted, just slightly but enough to change the air in the room again. Court is in recess, she said abruptly. Both counsels, chambers. Now a murmur rippled through the courtroom as the judge stood and exited. With the attorneys closed behind, Amara sat frozen. The envelope, the agent, the timing. Something had just landed that none of them expected. Not Langley, not Whitaker, not Diane. Malik had said someone inside the bureau was watching. This must have been it. 10 minutes later, the attorneys returned. Langley looked different, paler, stiff. The judge addressed the jury. Due to new developments submitted by a federal agency, she announced, this court is placing a temporary hold on proceedings. Jurors will be excused for the remainder of the day. Shock. Amara didn't move. Charles Whitaker stood slowly, whispering to his attorney. The FBI was inside the case now, not just attending, not just observing. They were stepping in, and Amara knew in that moment The story wasn't just about stolen money, it was about something far deeper, more dangerous, and she was standing in the eye of it as people began to file out. A quiet realization settled in her bones. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. The courthouse steps were quieter than expected. No shouting reporters, no clicking cameras, just the sound of Amara's heels tapping lightly against stone as she walked down alone, her coat wrapped tight against the wind. Her attorney, Marcus, stayed behind, called back by the judge for a closed-door conference. The FBI had asked for documents sealed by the court. Something had shifted, something big, and no one was saying exactly what. Amara didn't mind the quiet, because inside her, everything was loud. She pulled out her phone. There were missed calls, a few texts from Malik. "They're not going to stop now. Be ready." And one number she didn't recognize. No voicemail, just a timestamp. 3:47 p.m., right after the judge had dismissed the court. She stared at the number, and for reasons she couldn't explain, she saved it under one word: unknown. As she reached her car, a voice called out from across the parking lot. "Ms. James." She turned. It was Diane, the same woman who'd tried to undermine her credibility on the stand just hours ago. But now, her expression wasn't smug or polished, it was restless, haunted, even. Amara didn't speak. She simply waited. Diane took a few steps closer. "You were right. About the transfers. About Clearway Holdings. I didn't know how deep it went when you first showed me, but I know now." "Why lie under oath?" Amara asked, her voice low but steady. "I wasn't lying," Diane said. "I was surviving." "There's a difference." Amara raised an eyebrow. "Don't understand what Charles has his hands in," Diane continued. "That man doesn't just own a company, he controls people. Their careers, their secrets, their fears. I had a sick brother who needed treatment. I had debts, and I told myself I could walk away clean once it was over. But it's never over," Amara said, finishing the sentence for her. Diane nodded slowly. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she said. "I'm asking if you still have the documents. The original ones, the ones with the project codes and signatures." Amara hesitated. She hadn't told anyone, not even Marcus, where the full file was hidden. Malik had seen only fragments, because there was something in those records that didn't add up. 3 names that didn't appear on payroll. 3 accounts that weren't linked to any department. "Yes," Amara finally said. "I have them." Diane exhaled. "Then they're going to come for you, harder than before." She turned to walk away. "But I'll testify," she added over her shoulder. "When the time comes." Amara didn't thank her. Not yet. Words were cheap. But she watched Diane disappear into the shadows, and she knew something had changed. Not in the courtroom. In the war. Later that night, Amara sat at her kitchen table with the manila folder open in front of her. Her apartment was dark, except for the light above her stove, the same one that flickered when the weather shifted. Inside the folder were more than spreadsheets. There were wire logs, internal memos marked confidential, handwritten notes on yellow legal paper with initials she didn't recognize. But one document stopped her cold. A letter, stamped 6 months before her termination, addressed to U.S. Department of Energy. It wasn't about Whitestone, not directly. It was about a government subcontract awarded to a shell company, Clearway Holdings, the same company that had siphoned off funds through her department. Amara whispered the words out loud as she read them, requesting audit and suspension of disbursements until source is verified. This wasn't just embezzlement. This was federal fraud, tied to national infrastructure. No wonder the FBI was watching. She picked up her phone and texted, "Malik, we need to talk. In person. Tomorrow." Then she opened her laptop, and for the first time in months, she clicked on a video file she had saved and hidden under a false name. It was grainy, recorded from her phone, the night she'd discovered the discrepancy. In it, Charles Whitaker could be seen standing in the conference room, back turned to the camera. He was speaking to someone off-screen. "Just make sure the routing codes don't match Whitestone's. If it passes through 3 layers, no one will trace it." Amara had paused the video before, had hesitated to show anyone, but now she hit play. The next voice chilled her. It wasn't Charles. It was a woman. "Understood. But if the analyst finds out, we'll need a distraction." And Charles responded, "Then fire her before she finishes the report." It had all been planned. Amara stared at the screen, her reflection barely visible in the dim glow. This wasn't just about clearing her name anymore. This was about revealing the truth. For every person silenced, every employee pushed out, every whistleblower crushed by fear, she picked up the folder, the hard drive, and the printed emails, packed them into a travel case and zipped it closed. Then she sat down and wrote a single sentence on the inside cover of a notebook she kept near her bed. When the truth finally speaks, let it roar. She didn't sleep that night, because the courtroom wasn't the only place the truth would rise, and she had just become the voice of something far bigger than herself. The city was still waking up when Amara James stepped out of the cab in front of the federal courthouse. The morning sun hadn't yet broken through the clouds, and everything felt suspended like the world was holding its breath. She tightened her grip on the leather case in her hand. Inside it were documents that could collapse careers, destroy reputations, and maybe even save lives. This was more than a court appearance now. This was a reckoning. Across the street, a group of journalists clustered near the steps, murmuring into phones and testing microphones. They didn't know what was about to happen. No one did, except Amara and the FBI. She walked calmly, steadily, like she wasn't carrying the weight of truth and the cost of telling it. But inside, her nerves were unraveling, and the image of her son's face, Moloch, holding her hand that morning, whispering, "Be brave, Mama," was the only thing keeping her upright. As she entered the courthouse, she caught sight of Marcus waiting by security. He looked at her with a new kind of respect one earned, not assumed. "They moved the hearing to 4A, he said quietly. "Private session. FBI requested it." Amara nodded, her heart pounding louder with every step. They passed through metal detectors and silent stairs, winding through halls until they reached the designated courtroom. But before they could enter, an agent in a dark suit stepped forward. "Ms. James," he said, holding out a badge. "Special Agent Keller, I believe you have something we need to see." Amara glanced at Marcus, then slowly unzipped the case, and handed over a single copy of the documents, the ones tied to the federal contracts. The video transcript, the signed memos. Keller flipped through them without expression, then closed the folder. "These documents connect Whitestone Development and Clearway Holdings to 3 shell corporations, 2 offshore accounts, and a government energy contract worth over $180 million. "I didn't know it was that much," Amara said. "It's more," Keller replied. "This goes higher than Whitaker. A lot higher." The courtroom doors opened behind them. Inside, the atmosphere had changed. No more whispers or casual glances. No more quiet judgment from strangers who thought they knew her story. This time, it felt like the whole system was waiting to hear what she had to say. Judge Howard presided, stern, thoughtful, and known for his integrity. At his side sat a federal observer, eyes fixed on Amara as she took the witness stand once more. Marcus opened .com, clear, with none of the usual performance. He presented the documents one by one, and Amara walked the court through the web she had uncovered. Not just the missing money, but how it moved, who approved it, and why it never triggered alarms. At first, the room stayed silent. Then came the ripple gasps, frowns, side eyes among the court officials. When the video clip played, you could have heard a pin drop. Charles Whitaker's voice echoed through the speakers. "Make sure the routing codes don't match Whitestone's. Fire her before she finishes the report." Then silence. When Amara finally looked up, she saw something unexpected. Belief. Sympathy. Not sympathy, not pity, but belief. Even the judge's gavel, when it struck the bench, felt like a punctuation mark, not a warning. The federal observer stood. "Your Honor, the Department of Justice is submitting a motion to halt current proceedings pending an independent investigation into White Development and its subsidiaries." Whitaker's attorney objected, of course, shouting something about slander, illegal recordings, and fabricated evidence. But no one listened. Not anymore, because once the truth is heard, it can't be unspoken. After the session, as reporters swarmed the courthouse and headlines began to spin, Amara stood beside Marcus on the courthouse steps. A reporter called out, "Ms. James, do you have anything to say to the public?" Amara paused. "I never wanted to be here," she said, her voice steady. "I just wanted to do the right thing. And now that the truth is out, I hope it gives courage to someone else who feels alone, afraid, or silenced. You're not invisible, and you're not powerless." Then she turned and walked away, not because she was finished, but because a new chapter had begun. Later that night, Malik sat beside her on the couch, his head resting on her shoulder. They were watching the news. The scrolling headline at the bottom reading, Whitestone executives under federal investigation. Whistleblower credibility, COA, NFIRM. Demolik looked up at her and smiled. You did it. Amara shook her head gently. We did it. Every person who said no when it was hard. Every person who stood up instead of staying silent. I just happened to be the one they couldn't bury. Outside their apartment, the city pulsed with light. Inside, there was peace. Amara hadn't just cleared her name. She'd changed the game. And somewhere, whether in a boardroom, a courtroom, or a quiet office late at night, someone else would find the courage to speak. Because they'd remember her story, and they'd know truth has power. And when it stands up, the whole world listens. Asterisk.